All right, we'll call this Finance, Audit, and Budget meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I need a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion?
So move. Song.
Support, Van Sickle.
There's motion and support. Comments, questions? Please vote.
Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve the minutes dated November 4th, 2021. Is there a motion?
So move, Hall.
Support? Support, Wallace. Any comments or questions? Please vote.
Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. Public participation on agenda items only, the first hearing of the public. Does anyone wish to be heard? Does anyone wish to be heard? Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Presentation, brief history of countywide classification / compensation study, and we'll call up Executive Dilton.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Let me
Thank
get the
you.
motion to receive and file.
you
I'm
got
sorry.
it.
Is there a motion?
Motion by Farrington.
Support, Van Sickle.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
it's okay. Thank you, Commissioners. Good afternoon. I had Chairman Brown and I meet every other week just as a way to keep lines of communication open. And when I was up in his office about a week ago, we were talking about these budget presentations, and that one of the common themes that I had been hearing was some questions from commissioners about personnel expenses going up in recent years. So I thought it might be beneficial for some of the commissioners that have been on the commission for several years, and then some of the newer commissioners, to give maybe a 10 or a 12-minute presentation, just a high-level overview on how we got to where we're at today. And I wanted to talk specifically about classification and compensation study that the county undertook about 5 years ago. So I appreciate Chair Brown working with Chair Kleinfeld and Chair Sabatini on this committee to allow me the time on the agenda. So with that common theme, the board or the commissioners that have raised that, they're absolutely right that there has been increases in personnel expenses in recent years. But it was a conscious decision that was supported not only by the Board of Commissioners, but by administration. Let me back up to just like 2014, and I'll be very brief. In 2014, we the executive office team started really focusing on our unfunded liability in the area of retiree health care. Now, our pension back in 2014, the pension system, was about 93% funded, which really, when you compare with other municipalities and government across the nation, 93% is a place of envy. However, we knew that was a result of the Great Recession because there's some smoothing that happens, but we knew that, we were going to work hard to get back to be fully funded again. I will tell you just briefly, as of our 2020 actuary study, our pension system, the pension side of the retirement system, is 100.5% funded. So we're really proud of that. And it's because there's a long history of good fiscal management that goes way beyond the years that the executive form of government was here. But it was because of the fiscal prudence of the Board of Commission over many, many years. But we were focusing on this $550 million unfunded liability, $500 million in unfunded liability we had on the retiree healthcare side of the organization. $500 million, it was nothing to sneeze at. But what happens during lean economic times, particularly in governments, when the tax revenues aren't coming in order to sometimes keep programs offered to the public and to keep employees employed, sometimes municipalities will not pay into the unfunded liability. They'll let it go for a few years because they want to focus the limited dollars on on other places they feel are more important. That continues to happen today throughout the nation. However, because of the wisdom of the state legislation back in, I want to say it was 2012, there was legislation that was passed that allowed units of government to bond for their unfunded liability to shore up their retiree, their health plans and their pension plans. We started taking a serious look at that, and we talked to our advisors. And they said it's a wonderful thing to do if you can issue these bonds at a low rate of interest and secure your unfunded liability and shore it all up. But the first thing that you have to do is you have to close the pension system. You don't want to keep it open because you can unfund for the unfunded liability, but if you keep offering a defined benefit pension program and offer health care in retirement, when the rubber hits the road and the money isn't coming in again, that's how systems get underfunded. So in 2015, we were in negotiations with all 23 bargaining units, and one of our goals was to try to get the defined benefit pension program closed for all new people coming in after a date certain. We were successful in that, and the board at the time had ratified all of those collective bargaining agreements that we brought forward. So what that meant was that starting for every new county employee that was hired since January of 2016, there was no longer the defined benefit pension program, there's a defined contribution. And it's probably what, most organizations, I'm not saying municipalities, but what many organizations today offer is like a 401k or a match program. We did that. We closed it. And then we had an actuary study done of our retiree healthcare system that was $500 million underfunded. And they said, now that the plan is closed, it drops your liability from about $550 million to about $262 million. So with the support of the Board of Commissioners in 2015, we issued bonds for $262 million that was put into an intermediate trust, and our retirement side of the pension system is now 100% funded. And Steve, those bonds will be paid off in what year? 2035. So we're real proud of that. However, we also knew that no longer were the days of people coming to Macomb County government, working here 8 years and leaving with a pension and fully paid health care in retirement. We didn't offer that anymore. We knew that we were probably going to have a challenge of not only attracting but retaining county government employees here in Macomb County across the board. And that was way before pandemic and the struggle that not only we have, but so many organizations have today filling jobs. That was it wasn't even on the radar. But we knew that we needed to take a serious look at the overall compensation structure of county government employees. So we came to the board in 2015 with a proposal to do a countywide compensation and classification study at a cost of about, I think it was $390,000. We talked about what that means and that this was only a small piece, it was only a small financial piece of trying to rectify the situation in trying to create a compensation system where we could attract and retain. And the board was very supportive of that. We brought in a company to evaluate nearly 800 different job classifications. Now, there's only 2,500 employees here. I shouldn't say only. There's 2,500 employees. There were 800 different classifications. That's almost one classification for every 3 employees, and it was ridiculous. And some of the classifications only varied annually by $500. So you would get somebody in a position and maybe 6 months later, another job came up somewhere else in the county and it paid $500 more, not per week, but annually. So there was all this movement across the county because we had so many different classifications. The nightmare, the record keeping that goes on in HR, just trying to keep track of people. We even had one classification that only varied by $37 annually. So that is just something that evolved probably as the county grew and we hired more employees. So today we're proud to say that through that study and through collective bargaining process, we're now down to under 200 classifications. So it's more manageable now. So what we did, a presentation was made here to the board that talked about the results of the study. We knew, and we were committed from day one, that this, you oftentimes hear organizations that have a consultant come in and they do a study and then the plan goes up on the shelf and gathers dust and nothing ever happens again. But we were committed, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, that we were going to use the results of this study as a guide so that when we went to the negotiations table with the 23 different unions, we would use it as a tool to try to put positions based on the evaluation, based on the study, to put them in other classifications. And I believe it resulted in about 70% of the 2,500 county employees received an increase, an overall increase, based on what the results of the study were. There were about 30% that were red circled, meaning what that meant, and you might have heard that term red circled, what that meant was based on the market data in the area that was surveyed, that we all agreed to up front, that what they were currently being paid was at the market rate. So some positions, about 30% of them were red circled throughout the negotiations process. And as wages continue to be granted or when they're negotiated, then eventually they won't be red circled because they'll be getting increases with everyone else. So we made a really conscious decision to kind of see this through. And that was through negotiations that was taking place in probably, it wasn't the 15 negotiations when we closed the defined benefit. It was subsequent negotiations when the contracts reopened in 17 and 18. That's when we put people on different pay grades. In some saw salary increases, some more significant than others. But my point in this, in my communication with Chairman Brown, was that I thought it would be valuable, particularly for some of the newer commissioners, to kind of see how all of this has evolved. But it was a very strategic process. Yes, we're having trouble filling positions, but it isn't just because of the compensation anymore. It's because of the environment. I believe. Well, I know what happened in 2016. The Board of Commissioners at the time obviously saw some merit, and this was the other prong of the challenge that we had, was the Board of Commissioners solicited for proposals to have a elected official compensation study for all of the countywide elected officials here in Macomb County. Because from 2005 until 2016, the pay of all elected officials was frozen. There were not increases given. The last increase was given in 2005, and it stayed that way until the board conducted that study by a different firm than we had used for the county general employees. And they took that study, and it was implemented in sometimes in 2016 before the terms expired. So there were significant increases given to some of the countywide elected officials, and it was all based off of that market data and what other countywide elected officials are getting. So yes, there have been increases along the way. But the other problem that we had is we could not give deputy directors or assistant directors of countywide elected officials a market rate increase because it was going to put them over the elected official because their pay, their compensation had been frozen for 12 years. So we knew that until the Board of Commissioners had made a decision to increase compensation for countywide elected officials, we couldn't see the results of our study through. Because the last time I checked, there isn't any of the countywide elected officials that want their right-hand person, their deputy or their assistant director, to be paid more than them, and I understand that. There should be a hierarchy, there should be a structure in any organization. So that was the other key to this, that even if we had done the study for the county general employee population, had it not been done for the countywide elected officials, you probably wouldn't see spikes in personnel expenses. But those are leveling out now as the contracts start to expire this year because these bumps were given over the course of the last 3 years. So I know I just threw a lot at you, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but we feel we're in a much better position today with our compensation structure. It's not perfect, but it's way better than it was when you look that we had 18 classifications and people were constantly changing positions to go for $500 or $600 more to another job. We believe there's much more stability in the workforce today. I'm
Thank
happy to
you.
answer any questions.
Commissioner Zhang?
Thank you, Chair. The $390,000 study that you're referencing, what year was that?
2015.
2015. And can staff, Chair, could we have staff give us a copy of that study?
Sure.
I believe that there was a PowerPoint that was given when we made the presentation to the board in 2015.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to see that. I was just wondering, because it has been several years since that study has been done, and in looking at the budget and some of the salary, I just wonder if there is any plans to do another study so that is more updated and more in line with the current industry standards.
It's not anything we've talked about, but we are, and we have along the way, we've addressed individual issues. So sometimes, particularly since the pandemic, some of the positions have evolved. There are new positions that we didn't have back in that study. And sometimes we are asked, Human Resources has a tool, an evaluation tool, to see if this particular position, being that it's evolved in its responsibility or state mandated duties, is it placed in the right classification? So we have tools to do that. But we don't have the tools to do it on a countywide basis, and don't really think there's a need at this point.
Okay. Thank you so much.
welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Ha?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that, Mark. There were attributes in that I hadn't heard before as well. This is going to divert a little bit from the compensation study, but each budget that we've gone through, and you touched on it briefly, we're having difficulty hiring and maintaining employees for a multitude of reasons. Assuming, or hypothetically, if these positions were all filled, would you think we would be right-sized from an employee standpoint for the county?
In general, yes, in general. However, because of the pandemic, we saw that, there are needs within our health department that we need to be prepared for, So there's always going to be issues that arise based on what's going on in society as demands change and needs change. But I believe that we're at a good place right now. And I did want to mention, and I know that the board has heard this before, but we've not gone on a hiring spree. We wish we could go on a hiring spree just to fill all the vacancies that we have in county government, not to ask for additional. But the budget that we're currently working with right now, the 2021 budget, has about 100 fewer full-time positions than what we had in 2019. And that was a conscious decision because one of the things we've talked about is that if we're going to attempt to pay our people at market rate, And we're going to need support from our department leaders and our elected officials that maybe we don't need to replace every single person that leaves. And we were proud that we submitted this budget a year ago with 100 fewer positions. Now I know that the budget that's before you right now, there are several new positions. There are very few of the former positions that are built into this budget. Most of them are new. They're additional staff. And you know what they are and where they are. So as the county continues to grow, and we've not peaked yet, but as things change, we'll continue to evaluate it. And it's important to Executive Hackle that he tries to meet every department's most critical need, knowing that he can't give everybody everything that they want, but you try to spread what discretionary dollars you feel, we feel we're going to have for the upcoming year.
Thank you. And a second question, throughout the budgetary process, you have gone to all the department heads and said, can we see what you're, please generate a budget for us to see and review. Mm-hmm. When that review process takes place, do you then sit back with the department heads and ask them or talk to them about what was agreed upon?
We make no promises. When the department heads or the elected officials give us their budget, give it to finance, and usually I'm there with some of those departments. We make no promises that whatever they're asking for, above and beyond what's currently in their budget, that we can grant them. We tell them that we can't look at it in a vacuum, that we have to look at it at totality, because the executive's responsibility is to submit a balanced budget countywide. So until we gather all of the needs and we look at what additional things are being requested, that's when we sit down, and we always ask the department heads or the electeds to please prioritize. If you could only have one new position, what would it be? But if there's multiple positions, we might say, what's your first, what's your second, what's your third? And again, the executive always tries to address everybody's most critical need, not all of their needs.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. First, with respect to being able to pay employees what we should be paying employees, Michigan's tax structure for local units of government has a profound impact on that, does it not? Because we can drop, but we can't climb the way that we can drop.
Well, because a majority of our revenue comes from property taxes, and because of the limitations in the Headley, there are restrictions. I mean, when the bottom fell out everywhere in 2008 or 9, I remember Steve he's told me 100 times that we lost 20 years of property tax growth in 3 years. In 3 years. And I think we just recently. This year? So we just got back to where we were in pre-recession.
And I know my dad explained in Montana they have a system where, like movie stars move in to some areas. If the property tax jumps up an unusual amount, then the taxes will be rolled back in that area so that the locals can afford to live there. But if it plummets in another area of the state, say the copper mine dries up, that they actually have it sectioned off. Now, I don't know if it's still like that or, but so that it's constant and that the residents know what to expect in taxes and the local units of government know what to expect in revenue pretty much long term, as opposed to having to deal with the whims of the economy the way that we do. I am going to bring it back around to the compensation study. With respect to the countywides, and these are not the Board of Commissioners, the countywides, were there any countywides that were overpaid when you did that compensation study?
I didn't see the results of that. It was commissioned by the commission.
Okay, yeah, my understanding is all of the countywides were underpaid, every single one of them.
They all received increases to varying degrees,
Yes.
some more than others.
The only position that was considered overcompensated was the board chair seat, and that was at $65,000. And we turned around after we did that compensation study and took it up to $90,000 in 1 year. The reason I'm pointing that out is when we lost our chief of staff, we lost our chief of staff to another county for a significant amount of money. The reason that, my understanding is the reason HR viewed that position as being worth what it was is because of the salary of our board chair, that it's considered that that person is supposed to do the work that we generally assign to our chief of staff. So if our board chair was paid what the compensation study said, and I'm not even suggesting going down below 65 or even going back to 65. But if our board chair wasn't overpaid significantly, then our chief of staff position would be considered more valuable. And we are the only position in the county where traditionally in other counties, the board chair does make less than their chief of staff or a lot of people that work in their office. It's an unusual position. I just wanted to point that out for future discussion. And please don't take offense, Chair Brown. Chair Smith took offense to my bringing this up, and it's not about the individual chair that's there at the time. It might be, any one of us in the future. It is absolutely not about any particular individual. I'm just pointing that out because I don't think that anybody's ever seen that compensation study here except for a handful of us. Thank you. Commissioner Van Sickle.
Thank you, Chair. Just to make sure I understand the whole thing, the $262 million that we bonded back then, basically we took debt out of one pocket and put it in another pocket?
I don't believe that I don't believe that I viewed it that way. But again, I don't. Steve, do you want to talk to that?
I think what we ended up doing was in the eyes of some at the time, we took a soft cost, if you will, and we turned it into a hard cost. Some would tell you that. And my argument back to that is that the debt service today is less than if we were still paying actual premiums on retiree health care.
Okay, but we bonded $262 million.
Correct.
And the money from the sale of the bonds went into the retirement fund.
It went into a separate trust fund, but it went into a trust fund.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And then to repay the bonds, we repay them out of the general fund.
Generally speaking, yeah, all the funds.
And we're obligated to pay those through, what did you say, 2035?
2035.
So in selling those bonds, the county signed up for debt payments from then through 2035.
That's correct. But we were also, if we had not done that, we were also responsible for paying the debt service, or I'm sorry, the actual premiums for retiree health care from the general fund and all the grant funds. And what I'm saying is those premiums now exceed the debt service on the bonds. So from a budgetary perspective, the general fund is in better condition today than it would be if we had not done that.
I think the point that you're missing, Steve, in the equation is it was a bit of a gamble. But we invested, and we've done so well in our investments that we've paid the interest, and we've gained so much that we're going to come out ahead in the process. So we do transfer money over to cover those costs.
We do,
but we've done really well with the investments, so that we're ahead of the game. So I don't know if
I
you
wasn't
knew
getting that out of Commissioner Van Sickle's question, but that's true. What Commissioner Kleinfeld is saying is it was a hedge play at the time.
So basically, the borrowed money from the bonds went into this trust fund, and we've been getting better interest on that, on the money that the trust fund invested than what we're paying on the bonds.
Oh, absolutely, because we're able to invest that money just like we invest the pension assets. So we might be making double-digit returns, and we're paying 1.9%, I think, on the bonds, average, over the life of the bonds.
So why would anybody buy our bonds? I withdraw the
I guess
question.
if you're looking for stable fixed income at, 1 or 2 or 3%, you're okay. We were oversubscribed when we sold those bonds, meaning there was more demand than there was supply.
So from your description of that, you're implying that our investments are unstable?
I'm not implying that at all.
Okay. But they are more at risk. They're probably in the stock market and things like that?
We have equities, we have private equity, we have equity stocks, we have fixed income bonds, we have a mix of hedge funds, real estate. We have a mix.
Okay.
We're more heavily weighted toward stocks and equities than we are anything else, but we have a mix. We have an investment policy statement that indicates how much we can allocate into various buckets of investment types and vehicles.
So at the point in time when we sold those bonds, we brought the funding for the retirement up to 100%, and now we're up to 105% because of how well the money's being held in the trust funds are doing?
I would say no. So there's the pension side, and then there's a retiree healthcare side. What we're talking about now with the bonds is retiree healthcare side,
Okay, excuse me.
which is totally different.
Okay,
So we didn't bond for any of our pension liability because we were well-funded in that, and we have been for decades.
okay. Thank you. I think I have all I can digest for now.
Yeah, if you have more questions, just catch me offline. I'll be more than happy to get into more detail with you.
I'll do that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Farrington?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was part of the 6-person panel at the state that wrote all that, so if you have questions, I'll be glad to help. And good job on doing it at that time, because the amount of, well, it's kind of stayed that way, but at the time, that's what we were discussing was, there is a gamble aspect, but the odds were so low, it was very good timing by your group, so. Couple questions, Mark, hopefully you can answer, I'm not sure. When you recalculated, not you, but when the study recalculated the personnel costs, do you know what percentage overall as a county personnel went up? Not number of heads, but that the study said, yeah, we need to increase everyone on average by 4.2%. Do we know what that is?
I got to look at the money guy, the numbers guy.
If you could get that to us. And then I guess more for human resources, what percentage of openings out of the 2,500 are currently open, and how does that compare to 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, on any given month?
I bring all the right people with me, Andy.
I couldn't say on a percentage basis what, sorry, I'm not stating. I couldn't say on a percentage basis what percentage of openings are more prevalent now on a monthly basis. We don't necessarily track it that way. We look to fill every single position that we have.
Right,
all the
but
time. And-
Will you step up to the microphone so that we can catch it? Thank you.
right, but that's what I'm
just here
saying,
for
is we all
moral
know
support.
it's a lot worse, and it's taking longer to fill positions, or they're unfilled. I was just wondering, are we looking at 150 openings right now, and pre-pandemic, it was 20 openings a month? I mean, give us a feel for that.
No, I would say that pre-pandemic, we rolled over about 100 positions a year.
Okay.
So you're looking at it, I always look at it as
In
a
time to
10-month
fill
year.
was 60 days or something, probably?
Yeah, I would say yes. What we're seeing a lot more of now, Commissioner Farrington, is it's not the position so much, it's not multiple positions so much, it's the same positions that just keep opening up because there's more opportunity for folks. So you may have seen recently there was a conversation or a report on our highway maintenance people, and they're going to be plowing snow in a few months, hopefully not tomorrow. Those positions roll over frequently because they're very fluid. It's easy to go to Dan's or some other excavator, get a job making another $5 an hour, And then, those people are moving around a lot. So that's what we see a lot of right now. And it's about 100% more rollover than we had previously. So we went from about 100 annually, we're at about 200 annually now.
So time to hire, has that increased significantly?
Time to hire has increased significantly because what we're seeing now is people are not accepting the positions because of the pay. Highway maintenance people, we can go back to those again. It's just something that I've been working on
Or they
recently.
might have multiple offers, so you don't take ours.
So we had 6 individuals who we made offers to. Of those 6, 5 declined, 1 accepted, and the 5 who declined said that we're making more money elsewhere. We respectfully declined to come to the county. And I'm sorry that I'm saying that in front of, I'm rubbing a little salt in the wound here with the roads director.
By the way,
so-
memo.
Yeah.
Last question, I appreciate it, Chair. In any of the departments, you don't have to name names if it is true, are we holding positions because 3 years ago was a position, we don't intend to fill it, but we don't want to lose the slot as some budgeting people do? Are there some of those around the county budgets?
What I see more often is there's a plan. So yes, I would say there are. And usually what that is there's a plan. So I've got this budgeted position available. I've got this person who's getting close to retirement. I'd like to put those two together, and it ends up sometimes being a cost savings because I'm putting them together to hire this position, and I'm not going to replace those two moving forward.
But they would hit our budget as an additional one or an unfilled one.
Yeah,
Right,
but when we merge them together, so theoretically you're going to want 2 together to make a better one,
Right.
right? And when you make that better one, we collapse those other 2. You don't leave those sitting out there.
But for the approval process, it's sitting there.
Yes.
That's
So you might wait for a year or 2 while you're waiting for that individual to retire, so you can make that structural change. We do a lot of change through attrition here. We do everything we can not to lay off if we
Sure,
can possibly
sure.
avoid that. So
No, and that's-
that's what I'm describing as more of a change through
Yeah,
attrition.
no, and that's good. So you'd say there's a handful of those, dozens of those?
I would have to take a look at the documents. When you ask for like
Approximately.
percentages,
You've been around long enough.
I would not say dozens. I would say a
Okay.
handful. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Ha?
Thank you. Don't leave, Andrew.
What the heck? This is staged.
This is a
Mark sits down.
compensation study question. If you recall back in time, I was very active in trying to obtain a pay increase for our chief of staff and our at-will employee with both you and Mark. And the term red circled was used constantly throughout those conversations. Not once do I ever recall you indicating the compensation for the chairman of the board directly impacted the compensation for the chief of staff and the at-will employee. Am I correct?
It limits it on the top end. So if the board chair were to make less, it would limit the ability for us to compensate staff at the Board of Commissioners because they would all then be making more than the board chair. If the board chair made 35, maybe we would make different decisions at that point. But we see that as a cap. Every elected official, as Mr. Delden said, is the top paid position in a structure that then flows down from there. So we see it as a cap.
So with the red circling, which was the step we began at, you guys requiesced to agreeing through some compensation protocols, let's put it that way, to give them both pay increases over a period of time.
Yes, they would, and I believe that we not only get, I believe what that required was an additional level of job experience and education experience, which would increase those positions. But we cannot, we would not allow for those to rise then over the board chair at that point. I think I'm answering that question.
And Oakland County did pay her, Patty, I mean, that's what we're talking about here, a lot more than what we could have paid her. Isn't that correct?
Yes, my understanding is it's around $150,000 for the chief of staff at Oakland County. That's the rumor that I've heard. That would be more than almost anybody in the county. I would think that it's every elected official but the prosecutor, and the executive, and I would believe it is just a shade under the deputy county executives. It would be more than our finance director makes, our IT director. And I'm super happy that she's making that money in Oakland County. Good for her. But that's the type of competition we're facing, and our wages are not competitive still at this point. We're still working on getting competitive wages.
If we were to look at Oakland County, you don't ever see us being able to mirror image what they're doing.
No way. We've got a smaller tax base. We've got well, if everybody makes Macomb their home, maybe. I should transition that. But we've got a smaller tax base. We're a smaller footprint. We're just a different community.
Well, I just wanted to point out, I was talking to Dave Woodward 2 weeks ago. He's the chairman of the Oakland County Board, and he indicated to me that the vice chairman gets 60% of what the chairman gets. So I thought maybe we'd consider that too.
I use this trick all the time in negotiations. That's a board issue, not an executive issue. I'm not getting involved.
Good answer, Andrew. Thank you. That's all I have.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Kraft. I was deep in thought over that. Commissioner Kraft.
I know you're rusty, Madam Chair. It's been a while. I just want to point out that we do have some staff that do make more than the elected officials that they serve under. For example, the sheriff's office is one, and we have talked about that previously. So it's not an impossibility because it's sitting right here black and white. That can happen. And I'm curious, and obviously that's a lot of behind the scenes with collective bargaining and things like that. And like we've discussed previously is, the raises for the elected officials. Eventually the percentages aren't going to add up and the collective bargaining agreement may exceed what we are approving for elected officials. So just throwing that out there. I know we've talked about it before.
Yeah, Commissioner, that's a great point to make because I think it's a really unique and interesting and viable way to make sure that it doesn't happen. In the Sheriff's Department, what we have are not necessarily negotiated wages. You negotiate the base and then you have differentials in those contracts. And in order to have our deputies make more, which they needed to, and I'm so happy that we were able to pay them more and compete with the Clinton Townships, the Sterling Heights, and so forth. We gave them increases. The way that we would have kept the captains and the undersheriff underneath the sheriff is by paying our deputies less, and that to me wasn't a viable option. But when you look at any other elected official throughout the county, we don't have that construct anyplace else.
Right. Thank you. I just wanted to keep you up there a little bit longer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Prior to the county executive form of government, the board chair ran the day-to-day duties, including overseeing the departments. Is that correct? Chair, you're the only one here that precedes me. So is that correct? That's right. Okay. At the time that we got a county executive form of government, did the board chair take a pay decrease? No. Okay, so the board chair did not take a pay decrease even though they no longer oversaw all of the departments. So HR says that our employees have to make under what the board chair makes, but I'm not sure where that policy comes from. The folks that did the compensation study did not see it that way, and they looked at other counties that were similar to ours. They did not see it that when there's a county executive form of government that the board chair has to make more than all of the employees underneath them. That is a philosophy that our HR department has. I'm not sure by whose direction, but I don't think it's consistent with other counties and what other counties do. And I think that matters because it is consistent that countywides would be paid more than the individuals that work underneath them. Our situation is different. The person who runs the office is the chief of staff. It didn't used to be, but we have a county executive form of government now, so I just wanted to point that out. I don't see any more speakers. Is there anyone else that wants to speak? Okay, thank you. Please vote.
Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you for that. Okay, budget reviews, we have up first Michigan Works. Can I get a motion to receive and file?
So moved by Nard.
Moved by Haas, supported by Nard, and we have Director Riley here.
Good
Hello.
afternoon. Let me just get in front of me what I had sent to you. The Macomb St. Clair Employment and Training Agency, that's a lot of words, so we often call ourselves MCETA. Publicly, we are known as Macomb St. Clair Michigan Works. We do have offices throughout Macomb County and then one in St. Clair County in downtown Port Huron. My department is entirely grant funded. None of our costs come out of the general fund. It's a combination of federal workforce dollars, acts that make that funding available. I always feel that's an important part to get out first and early. So this last year has certainly been interesting. I am dealing with, my department, I should say, is working with the local workforce, the local employers, trying to get the two parties together. That's certainly been a unique and interesting task in the middle of a pandemic, of which we don't have, luckily too many pandemics to refer to figure out how to get ourselves through that. I will let you know, we are right now open for service. Our doors are open, and we have had people coming in the doors, but of course, we are certainly not seeing the traffic that we are accustomed to. So, we have seen some changes coming up. As you are all no doubt aware, unemployment has changed their processes lately. No longer is the pandemic money made available. And just this past Sunday, they reinstated the requirement to register with Michigan Works, whether that is in person or virtual. Looking at the last 2 days of business, we have not yet again seen an increase of traffic in our centers, but we anticipate at some point that will certainly come back around. One of the programs that we operate is our PATH program. That's in conjunction with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. They have reinstated the work search requirement, and our referrals from MDHHS has returned to pre-pandemic levels, but again, we have not had the full participation yet based on rules that are given out by MDHHS. I'll pause for a minute. Any questions that I am not yet addressing that you want to hear about?
Yeah, Commissioner Ha.
Thank you, Chair. Did I hear you say your entire budget is grant funded?
Correct.
Congratulations on
Thank
that. You. You've got a line item here that says charges for services that's increasing, what is that, 230,000? What charges for services do you have? Could you define that?
Yes, most of our services are actually, a lot of this, of course, is going to be salary. It's going to be fringe benefits. One thing, because of pandemic, I did have to issue cellular phones to all staff as we were working remotely from home to provide availability for them to access their work phones, make contact with customers from the house without using their personal devices. So part of that is an increase in that equipment. And again, that is paid for through the variety of workforce dollars. But that was a notable increase, was the cost to purchase the phones, but then also maintain monthly service. So that was, again, one notable increase. Also, I did need to increase certain parts of the budget because as meetings or trainings became much more virtual, the cost of those increased because of technology costs from the host. So if we had to register and pay, that was going to be a raised cost.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Chair Brown. Thank you, Chair Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Your department's your agency's done critical things for us and it's been a key part of keeping our economy and our communities together. And I want to say thank you to all the work you've done to help get people on their feet and find jobs. And in this low employment environment we have now, What challenges do you see now? I see in your budget, you've got personnel costs going up again. Are you adding staff during this time to try to help with the issues we're dealing with, and explain how the personnel that you have on staff relate to the current environment we're in?
Well, first off, thank you for the appreciation. I'm just a guy behind the desk. The thanks really goes to my department. They're the ones that are meeting with the public and addressing the needs that the job seekers as well as the employers need. We have added, my department runs off of a 3-year contract. That new contract began on July 1, 2021. Part of that did involve an increase of staff. Part of that was reflective of the pandemic and looking forward to when we are coming out of this, and we figure we will have a very high demand of job seekers coming at us, as we already have employers seeking our assistance in finding that talent. In that process, I did take staff and reclassify to add an additional supervisor, and I do have, unfortunately, on the document that I sent you, my apologies, typo, I have 4 Career Center supervisors and not 5. 4 is reflected in the budget. The 5 was a misprint on my document. Our grants are becoming more technical, and our demand among the job seekers and the employers is more, so that I did need to have an additional supervisor to keep an eye on our grants and to keep them moving forward, as well as to address our staff as they are much more remote. We're dealing with staff in the office as well as home. Challenges we're seeing is the short term is to fully come out of this pandemic. The long term is to recover from the pandemic. And what we're seeing in the change of that workforce. We have a shrunken labor force as a result of the pandemic. Folks that were on a plan to retire at some point, a lot of individuals sped up that plan. So we had more people leave the workforce than we had enter through millennials or Generation Z. Another challenge we have is, as people are looking to get to work, is childcare. Probably one of the largest hitting industries, occupations, is that of childcare. And if individuals have to put their children somewhere while they go to work, there's not as many options now, and that causes a lot of wait lists, which can be that challenge for the individual. Also, we've seen this throughout the county, working a remote schedule, having that opportunity to work from home and not always going to the office every day, kind of introduces a new element that I think a lot of workers like and hope to hold on to. I know that's a popular opinion among many of my staff, probably all. But a lot of people are looking for those kind of jobs too, where if they can work from home, that alleviates a lot of things. I myself, I'm pretty sure, Andy's gone, so I can say this. So we're seeing where people can get their job done, and there's a lot less requests for time off, right? That work-life balance evens out. So how do we do that? How do we see the workforce change? How do we see the employer response change to that? We went through a very disastrous period years ago, the recessionary decade. And some of you may be familiar with a program called No Worker Left Behind. My department provided that service. And we've been likening where we're at right now to that period of time. And at that time, a lot of individuals' credentials were outdated, no longer useful. We've sent a lot of people through school, and we're kind of seeing, planning for that rush to come back. But my thought is it will not be as much of a demand on credentialing as it will be just the need to get back to work. A lot of people coming through at once, and it'll be a huge competition, job seekers all vying for the same postings. So what we're seeing is, as people return to our career centers, as they reignite job searches, as they're capable of doing that, our services are going to tilt much more to our business services, our employer-focused services, than just simply assisting people getting through a credentialed program. So as part of that, we are looking at how do we structure the department to prepare for that and be ready and address those job seeker needs, but again, meeting the employers. And so that is something we're actively working on right now as part of a redesign, a restructuring of my staff's assignments. So when that happens, we are prepared for it, and it's, we're effective and ready to go.
As elected officials, we're out in the public all the time, and we hear that regardless of where we go, everyone complains they can't get the workers. We don't have the labor to support our jobs. Our unemployment was, 4.5%? It was posted the other day. Mm-hmm. Historically, it's getting pretty low. It's approaching full employment technically, but
Correct.
But yet we still have all this demand for labor.
Right.
And it's, what do you see as the solution? Is this the reskill of the labor force, that they get them retrained for the right jobs? The state of Michigan, I think, just recently enacted new requirements on people receiving unemployment benefits. They have to check in so many times a week now, or something. You're probably familiar with it. Does that affect your agency, and does that put more burden on your staff, or does it make any difference?
At the moment, I've not seen a significant difference, and it would never be a burden. But the coming out of this pandemic, where we're at right now, the status of unemployment, the offering of those benefits has not really been a driving force to where we're at right now with the workforce. I'm, definitely as part of that equation, but we have seen this in Michigan. We have seen this in other states that moved before Michigan, that stopping any kind of enhanced unemployment benefit did not immediately drive individuals back into employment. As part of that equation, it was not the sole driving force. Again, part of it is that, the labor force has shrunk. We have not replaced new workers with those that have retired. An interesting one that we were trying to work on with is the restaurant and the retail industry. We had seen ahead of time for a number of years a shift where people were moving out of restaurant and retail. Unfortunately, the pandemic just kind of sped that up. We have seen for years, I've had special national emergency grants that addressed people that lost their jobs from retail because retailers were closing. We no longer have a Parisian. Macy's was cutting back. Sears is gone. Kmart's gone. And that list goes on. And part of it was the shopping habits of individuals. And then a lot of workers were seeing that and moving into other jobs. And we have seen a retooling of that. I would say my absolute most popular go-to classroom-based training to retool is that of LPN, followed with truck driving. So interesting, coming out of pandemic, it hasn't cooled anyone's senses of wanting to get into the medical field and be a nurse, which is good because we need them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairwoman.
Thank you, Commissioner Matuzak.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. A couple of questions. I just wanted to make sure I understood. Your supplies and services line took a huge jump this year, as did your capital outlay. Is that what you were talking about, computers and phones?
That's a lot. That's a part of it, yes. Previously, I may have only had 6 people with phones and monthly service, and then that increased to my full department of 46.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood
So I'm
that.
not saying that's like the sole, but that certainly was a driving force.
Okay. I'm interested in the Clean Slate program, because that's really critical, getting convictions off people's records so they can actually get to work. Macomb County was pretty slow getting off the gate. The surrounding counties did a lot more with a lot more publicity, a lot more public events. And you have it listed in your supplemental sheet as a challenge, not a goal. So I'd like to know what you're planning on doing with the Clean Slate program.
I do have that. First off, that is a wonderful program. It is new to us, of course. It's a challenge to me because of the points that you outlined. We were not the first one out. Internally, there was some mixed communication direction that we were waiting on getting clearance on before we move forward. And because of that, it took a little extra time locally in Macomb and St. Clair to get our contracted attorneys on board. We have done a number of press releases. We are in those active talks right now about trying to re-release, if that's such a thing, or how do we get larger attention? Because clearly, yes, Wayne and Oakland particularly got on the game before us, and they're also seeing a lot more attention coming through. I think part of it might be perhaps the size, and part of Clean Slate is also where the infraction occurred, that they are working on trying to expunge. So we are talking right now internally about how do we communicate that out again further, larger, get more eyes on it. And part of it too is the financial allotment that was given to the Macomb St. Clair Workforce Development Board. And we are anticipating that the funding that we have right now allows for about 1,000 individuals to get expunged after we process their application, move them on through the attorneys, and get them through the court system. We are right now in the process of 300 and some individuals. So part of it too is we want to make sure the word gets out. Please don't get me wrong, but we also want to temper it because we don't want to get to a point that we start putting people on a wait list or sending them away, because this is a great opportunity for their job readiness. But we don't want to have them come to a center because we have all this money, and then the first thing we say is we've obligated those dollars and we're waiting for more. So part of it too is a measurement of, are they going to issue more? Are they going to reallocate from other areas? Because while we are behind, if you will, Wayne and Oakland, there are certainly counties throughout the state that haven't spent their money at a lesser amount than us.
Thank you. I will say that I work with a small little group of people. We rounded up 20 people, found through nonprofit organizations and the Ministerial Alliance to sort of pre-screen people, got them in the process, and found the money to pay for the fees about fingerprinting and other things. So
excellent.
There is real interest in the community out there,
right,
among the nonprofits and the churches, to make this a success. And so I hope that there will be some outreach.
No, I appreciate that. And that's certainly that's one of the things that have been discussed, as well as going to our local district level courts. Even our circuit court right here as to, the way we marketed the first time did not get on the right eyes. So how do we alter that approach to make it right this time?
One other just comment on your supplemental worksheet in your goals and completed or working on, you actually have real numbers. I'm so excited about that. Most of the goals and accomplishments we see are the mushy words about we're working on it, we've done something. You actually have numbers. I'm very excited about that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Farrington.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not sure if you can answer this or we'll have to call Steve up, but you hit on something that caught my attention, the phones, and that was a good idea under the circumstances, obviously. What do we provide those employees that need phones now that didn't have before? As far as, do we buy the phones? Do we buy just hand them $50 a month? I mean, how does that program work? And there's a reason I'm asking this.
The money doesn't go, there's no actual cash or anything like that goes directly to the employee. The phones are ordered through county IT, and the bill is paid by the county, and then it is charged to my budget line.
Do we know how much it is per person?
I generally try to pick lately, luckily Verizon's been having some good sales, so I've been able to pay off of the free phones. Monthly payment with a hotspot, we are probably looking at 40.
Okay. Close enough. Yeah, I was just curious for another department. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's again, before they might go over their data plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. According to Steve, $39.95 or $40 depending on which day. I'm going to take note of that.
They call them a bean counter for a reason.
We like to use the phone on off-peak hours.
Commissioner Nard.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to ask, did I hear you say something about that you're training the people as well?
Correct.
Are you training them in high-level jobs?
Yes, thank you. We do hold ourselves to a demand occupation list that gets reviewed and updated regularly. We are minutes away from a new one actually coming out because of some new grants that we're working on, both apprenticeship-related and classroom-related. And so we do have a demand list, and that is created with a number of statistics and research and forecasting out several years. So if there's an individual that is pursuing a degree, we want to make sure that the job is just as much in demand when they walk across the stage as when they start it right now. But that is a list that is focused on Southeast Michigan, and then on occasion, depending on the occupation, with emphasis to Macomb or St. Clair County.
Okay. Now, it's called St. Clair, but you handle all of Macomb, so somebody from Warren or any other city in Macomb could come in.
Absolutely. We have 4 centers in Macomb. Warren, which is at 11 and a half in Van Dyke, Roseville at 12 in Groesbeck, Mount Clemens right around the corner here across from the Y, Clinton Township at 19 Mile and Hayes, and then again we have the 5th center over in Port Huron. We do operate a priority of service to Macomb and St. Clair residents, or those individuals that may have been laid off from Macomb or St. Clair. And then exception to our U.S. veterans, we do not have a residency priority for them.
That's cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I see no other speakers. Please vote. Oh, wait. Commissioner Song got her.
You looked
got
right
in
at
there.
me, so I thought you were going to call for
You're
me.
very
Thank
quick.
you, Chair.
Commissioner Song.
I just have a question about the conferences in your supplemental. You had listed the annual Michigan Works Conference for 5742, but in the budget, looks like you allocated $11,000. So what is the difference there?
This was the conference requiring travel. And the upcoming conference will be, if it's maintained in person. The last 2 years, they did move it to virtual only, but they are going to be referring or going back to the in-person conference, in which case it's going to be held in Mount Pleasant. That budget is related to the conference cost times number of employees, as well as the hotel cost. I do have other conferences and trainings that are maybe a day long or such. I did not include it on the supplemental sheet because it did not require travel.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I do not see any other speakers.
Going once? Going
Please vote.
Motion passes 11-0.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Parks and Recreation, Director Smeagol. Can I get a motion to receive and file?
So moved by Nard.
Support Farrington.
Moved by Nard, supported by Van Sickle. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. I believe you should all have revised budget sheets for the Park Fund. What we did was we revised our revenue upward, which is a good thing, and I'll touch on that here shortly. So, generally speaking, the budget in 2022 is pretty static from years past. As you'll see, the revenue in the Park Fund is primarily generated from 2 contracts we have with Hillside Productions. The total is about $240,000, not just from those contracts. We have some miscellaneous revenue for events like the Italian Fest or things like that. But the lion's share is from the Hillside contracts. The one contract we have with them is for parking. It guarantees us 25% of parking revenue from all the events out there with a minimum of $125,000. So So long as the parking revenue doesn't exceed 500,000, we get our 125. If it does, we get the differential. I think maybe in my 30 years here, we've exceeded, well, the contract's only been in place for 20 years or 21 years. In that 21 years, we may have gotten more than 125,000 once. Generally speaking, it doesn't exceed 500,000. And what happens is we get a report from Live Nation, used to be Ticketmaster at one point in time, that lists out all the revenues that were generated through ticket sales, so we can verify, whatever the ticket revenue was for Hillside Productions, do the math, figure out if we are owed anything more than 125,000. That contract was signed in 2000. It's been extended. It ran through 2020. There was an automatic 10-year extension at the option of Hillside. They exercised that option, so we're with that contract for another 10 years. That contract also calls for payment to the county of 1% of ticket sales. So we use that same report to know how much that amount is on an annual basis. It's about $35,000 a year. That's one revenue that was not built into the original budget that you received. So that's one of those upward adjustments. We also have a separate contract with Hillside for rental of Independence Hall. That was $40,000 for years and years and years. We renegotiated that last year for $60,000 a year. That contract expires at the end of 2022, so it'll be up for renewal. And then, like I said, we get some miscellaneous revenue for, one-off festivals and events out there. So we got another $20,000 built in for that. So that's the main components of the $240,000. On the expense side, we have one personnel out there, a parks maintenance supervisor. We added that position in 2019. The largest line item in the budget, as you'll see, is supplies and services for just over $220,000. That is made up primarily of three things. It's $137,500 of depreciation, $50,000 for security. So the county is responsible for all the security for the concert events. That's provided by the sheriff's office. There's corresponding revenue in the general fund sheriff department budget. So there's a cross charge there. And there's $30,000 for grounds care, landscaping, mulching, whatever it happens to be. And there's about $4,000 for various supplies, office supplies, janitorial supplies. That makes up the $221,000. The county is also responsible for all the utilities, including the lights inside the amphitheater. So that's gas, water, and light, or gas, electric, and light. That's the $112,000. There's $38,000 for repairs and maintenance. So we're responsible for all the repairs and maintenance on everything outside the amphitheater. Hillside's responsible for everything inside the amphitheater. Is how that works. And then there's vehicle operations. We have some equipment out there, gas and things of that nature. And there's some little bit of money in there for capital outlay every year. So at the end of the day, the revenue is not sufficient to cover the expenses. As you can see, the general fund has to kick in about $85,000 a year. It's $86,000 for the next 3 years. You will also notice on the second page of the document, the unrestricted fund balance is being drawn down every year. What we've been trying to do is hold the general fund contribution static for as long as we can until we draw down on the fund balance. You'll see at the end of '24, we're forecasting that we'll have just under $97,000 of fund balance there that can be used to cover major repairs. If we had to, let's talk about building a new shed out there basically for the equipment and that kind of thing. If we were to make this kind of full or whole, if you will, the general fund would have to kick in another $40,000 to $50,000. So that's kind of the numbers behind the numbers. I can try to answer any questions. I'd hope to have Vince Vidiano here to answer some operational questions if you had any. He's unable to attend, and Mark was going to fill in for him, and he had to leave as well. So if I can answer questions, I will take them down and get back with you.
Thank you. Commissioner Song?
Thank you, Chair. Steve, I might have missed this from the beginning. This Parks Fund is regarding the Freedom Hill.
Freedom Hill, I'm sorry, yes.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, and not any other parks?
Freedom
Because you
Hill
talked
only.
about
Yep,
parking fees and other things.
yep, it's all Freedom Hill.
Okay, so are we operating at a loss? Because you're saying like you have to pull from the general fund $86,000.
We are running at a loss, including the 86,000, but there's fund balance. We had a lawsuit settlement years ago for $500,000 with
Okay.
Hillside over the parking contract from, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. Well, not 20, the contract's only 20 years old, 15 years. So we had a settlement of a lawsuit for $500,000 that went into this fund, and that was meant to be spent down over the years.
Okay,
so.
got it. That's great. Now, my next question is regarding the equipment, like the airplanes and all the Army things.
Tank and then.
Yeah, the tank. And so do we charge to have those on the grounds? 'Cause I know they had
believe those
paid-
are owned by the military,
Right. I
think.
remember we
I
had
will
approved.
follow up on that.
We had approved funding that they were providing to paint the equipment. I'm just wondering, like, are we renting it from them or?
I
like,
don't
is it
believe
just-
so, but I'll find out for you.
Okay, I'd be interested because I mean, I don't anticipate any of those like eating up the cost of like utilities, but it is
No.
taking up, it does use some space in the park. So is it being there on a lease or what does that
I'll find
relationship
out
look
for
like?
you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and Executive Reyes said any non-financial, if there are any questions, he may be able to answer some as well. Commissioner Van Sickle?
Thank you. To build on Commissioner Zong's comments, I remember a few months ago, Facilities brought to us a contract to have the plane, I believe it was painted. And in looking at the numbers here in the repairs and maintenance, I don't think that was in there. So I'm wondering where that was and why isn't it in part of the parks budget?
That's a good question. I'm not familiar with that contract coming to the board, so I'll have to do some research on that
Yeah,
and
talk
find
to
out
Lynn.
where it should be. I would submit to you that it probably should come out of this budget, but I'm just not familiar with that particular item that came before the board.
Yeah, I don't recall whether we have to pay like a lease on the plane, but I think the plane's there gratis, but we have to maintain it. And that's what the funds were
Yeah.
for, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, that sounds familiar to me, but I'll find out. I'll talk to Lynn and find out when she brought it to the board and see where we proposed to pay for it when it came before the board. We can always change that funding.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Zinner?
I can't see it on here, so I'm glad you found me. Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure, was that plane? Oh, Sugar Jets. I remember the painting of the plane, but I'm thinking it was the plane on Groesbeck. That plane on Groesbeck, this was over
You're
there too.
talking about the jet bar, aren't you? That's something totally, that's
Oh,
not
a
even
jet,
counties.
yeah.
The
I remember
American-
that one. I
American
didn't know if
Legion,
you were
I
talking
think,
about
maybe.
something else. Yeah.
I just know it is the jet bar.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers. Please vote.
Motion
And it-
passes 11-0.
Thank you. And it does, Commissioner Van Sickle, I do believe you were right. It was like a wash, but we had an obligation if we were going to have this thing. So we'll find out. Thank you. All right. Next, we have Director Santo. We have roads. Can I get a motion to receive and
So
file?
moved, Song.
Moved and supported. You're on.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing us to present to you our Department of Roads budget for the next construction season. I just want to reiterate, like Director Riley did for Michigan Works, The Department of Roads budget does not come out of the county general fund. We get Public Act 51 funds, Michigan transportation funds as a majority of our budget, as well as other state and federal programs, grant monies, and community match monies from the various communities within Macomb County. So, in addition to that, as HR Director McKinnon had stated, if anybody does know of any highway maintenance persons that are willing to work for us, we are looking for those individuals. So we do have some vacancies that we are looking to fill as far as that goes. So I do have Michelle McTack, our Finance Director, that runs our finance department for the Department of Roads. Between her and her staff, they're very excellent in accounting for the roads department, which is different than general accounting for the county. We have specific audits as far as Act 51 funds and federal audits that are very involved, and I applaud them for the work that they do. So just as some general feedback, obviously, as you can see from the multitude of construction projects that are currently in Macomb County, whether they be state, county, or local projects, there are hundreds of construction projects, whether they be road, bridge, or otherwise. We do have a very fruitful and robust program on a year-to-year basis, as you can see, because I'm usually in front of you at least a couple times a month, presenting whether it be state contracts, local contracts, or cost-share agreements with the communities. We do have in Macomb County about 4,400 of various miles of roads. And the Department of Roads is responsible for about 1,800 miles of that as far as our jurisdiction and responsibility. On average, we do have a budget for construction projects and maintenance of about $100+ million a year. As you can see from our budget that we're requesting, it is very robust once again. Our motto is at the road department is there isn't a road or bridge that we can't fix if we have the funding for it. So we do applaud the additional monies that we are getting from the state and federal government, although it is short of what we actually need, but it is better than not getting any increases whatsoever. So we will make good use and are making good use of the additional funds that we do receive, and are hoping with this infrastructure granting and program through the federal government that we can do even more with the money that we do receive. Just some of our programs that I know I've presented in front of you as far as our annual programs. We do have our construction program, obviously, annual construction, rehabilitation, and reconstruction of our primary and local roads on an annual basis. We do have our maintenance department, which does handle patchwork, crack sealing, pothole repair, grading, brining the gravel roads. We do have a limestone program that is in the northern communities, as well as a state maintenance contract where we maintain the state roadways through a state maintenance contract. That is a significant amount of funding that we do get to maintain the state roads that fall in Macomb County. We do have our pavement preservation programs that are very integral to the county, both HMA and concrete pavement repairs that we do perform on primary and local roads on an annual basis. And as you can see from some of the submittals that were before you previously, we do have a subdivision reconstruction program for some of the deteriorating subdivision roads, and that is a partnering between the Department of Roads and the communities to repair those much needed subdivision roads that do come about. So just some fast facts. Once again, I already stated that we oversee about 1,800 miles of roadway, responsible for Macomb County, 224 bridges, more than 500 culverts, 900 traffic signals, over 300 traffic cameras, and over 60,000 signs. Just some of our accomplishments this past year. The biggest one is obviously the Innovate Mound project, the mega project that we have is a design build project, 9-mile stretch on Mound Road between 696 and Hall Road. That did get underway this year as far as starting the project in August of this year. That project is slated to be completed by 2024. So that is a lot of time and effort has went into that. It's not our normal delivery method as far as design bid build, but it's very unique and exciting to look at that moving forward. We reconstructed 6 lane miles of primary and local roads. We resurfaced and rehabilitated more than 70 lane miles of primary and local roads. We crack sealed more than 30 lane miles of primary and local roads. We replaced 1 bridge. We rehabilitated 6 bridges. And we have continuing traffic technology and communication network modernizations, upgrades to signals, upgrades to intersections, and expanding our fiber network, which actually communicates between our main hub at Comtech and our traffic signals at the various locations throughout Macomb County. And we do have, obviously, replacing critical road drainage infrastructure, some of our larger culverts. Sometimes they fail. We respond to those in a timely fashion on an annual basis also. And I guess to finish up, we do have our asset management program that I have presented before you, where we are looking at some contracted services to make our approach to selection and moving forward with projects more efficient and more timely. With that, it not only looks at the infrastructure as far as our assets of roads and bridges, but also the other aspect is managing our assets and, more importantly, our human assets, our workers in general. So I do have before you a staffing ask of 3 additional positions. One would be in our engineering department, civil engineer 3, which would be designated for bridge design, which is much needed. We prefer to do our own design in-house instead of subbing that out and contracting that out. It is more cost effective to do that internally versus contracting that service out. We get a much better product by doing it internally. As far as our traffic department, we're asking for 1 electrician, electrical technician, space and inspector. We do have a lot more projects. We get CMAQ funding. They are state granted funds, congestion mitigation and air quality funds. That's what the CMAQ acronym means. And our traffic department is very good at finding and acquiring these grant monies. So we are getting more and more projects that need coverage. And in order to make sure that the coverage is adequate, to ensure that we get the product that we want within the budget that we want, we have to oversee that with staffing, and there's a need as far as an additional electronics tech. And lastly would be in our accounting department, which would be an account specialist. With the additional projects as far as engineering and traffic, there is a need to have additional staffing to account for the finances, to account for the cost share agreements, to ensure that we go through the right process, that our audits are timely and in line with what the requirements are. So there is a need for account specialist in that department. So at this point, I would look to field any questions that you may have.
Oh, you have a lot of them. Commissioner Song?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try to be short. My first question is more of a technical question, so maybe Brian, I don't know if it applies to you, but also with the Michigan Works budget, if it's all grant funded and we are looking at the budget, I mean, what can we actually do about the budget? If that makes any sense, Steve.
There is general fund money that goes into roads, isn't there? There's zero.
So as we're looking at this budget, I mean, you're presenting it, I mean, and if we have, suggestions, what can we really do if it's grant funded? Am I making any sense? I don't know if I'm asking.
I mean, obviously,
So for example, like the electrical staffing role, you said that it was state grant funded, right? So that role would be funded by grants. And so, as a board, we can't say, well, you can't have an additional staff person.
Madam Chair, may I interject?
Yes, go ahead.
Because I was wondering the same thing. The only thing would be we're paying down our balance. So that would be if we denied some of the things they did, the balance wouldn't be taken down as it is in this budget over the next 3 years.
Okay.
Other than that,
I mean, that sort of answers the question.
They're fully paid for through grants, so it's just the fund balance.
Okay,
Either goes
got
up
it.
or down.
Yeah, and I think the question I'm asking kind of applies more to the Michigan Works budget than this one, but because this one is very heavily grant funded too.
Right. Roads, I would say, is a little different than Michigan Works in the sense that it has a fund balance that can be spent down. So to Commissioner Farrington's point, in the case of a program like Chris Riley's, it doesn't have any fund balance. If you reduce expenses, you're reducing the corresponding revenue. So you're reducing direct services to clients, in the way I think about it.
And the amount that is being awarded, right, the grant?
Correct. So they've been awarded a certain amount, and if you were to reduce allocation.
I mean, I definitely don't want to imply that that's what I want to do, but I want to know,
any reduction in
so I
an
could better do
appropriated
my job.
expense will just draw down on less of their award, more or less.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Steve. That answers it. And thank you, Commissioner Farrington. Now, my last question, I promised my husband I would ask you this. And these are regarding the steel plates that are on roads when they're being repaired. I haven't seen any on county roads, but like, for example, there's one at 13 or Chicago where they put those huge plates of steel, I don't know, to cover up a manhole or something, and that, can do damage to a car and tires. So why is that?
Sometimes there are emergency situations where there is a roadway, a structure that might have, the casting fell in, or there's deterioration on a casting. We need to bridge that with something that's a temporary fix. And it is a steel plate traditionally, and it is cold patched on each end. Typically that would not do damage if people drive the appropriate speeds through the zones. But that's just something that is necessary to protect the drivers while we look at a fix for that particular section of roadway.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for this presentation. I'm very excited about all the projects.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Zinner?
Thank you, Chair. Brian, I have to ask, when is Cass not going to have any more cones? Cass Avenue? They go, then they come, and, I know there's times when they have to work on things, but...
I can tell you that we are done with our project as far as the bridge is concerned. The project that is ongoing right now is a Clinton Township project for sidewalks. They got TAP grant funding for sidewalks going from George Park to, I think, a park on Clinton River Road. So the work that's going on right there is basically the township work, not ours, as far as the bridge is concerned.
And that bridge, what bridge are you talking about?
The bridge over the Clinton River, just west of Groesbeck and Cass.
All right, I'm also the bridge on Harper in Clinton
Oh,
Township.
Harper. Yes, Harper Road Bridge. We are currently working on that. That will wrap up as far as opening back up to traffic. I believe in a couple, 2 weeks or so. We do have a need because of some material that's still yet to come in as far as some pin and hanger work that needs to be done on the bridge. We're going to open that back up, but we'll have a need in the spring of next year to come back. We do also have to paint, and it's outside paint season limitations. So we need the warmer weather next year in the spring to be able to finish our paint work out there. So we will be opening that up shortly, but we will have a need to close it back down for a brief interim amount of time next year.
All right, thank you. Also, there were times over this last few months where you would give us a cost for the project, and then you would have sidewalks that you would come back for to get money for? Or maybe were those grants also? Do you remember, like on Cass and Moravian,
we are a fiduciary of the community. So a township that requests TAP grants, we actually apply for them, and that program runs through us as an Act 51 agency. So the community does the sidewalk program through the TAP grant, and they pay us. We have a cost share where they pay us, and then we recompensate the TAP grant. But they get that funding through us, basically, through SEMCOG, through us, to the communities. And that's what a lot of the agreements you're seeing as far as sidewalks. It's cost share agreements and contracts for that, pretty much independent of us. So.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Ha.
Thank you, Chair. That bridge on Harper that Commissioner Zinner was referring to, that has been closed for almost the entire golf season. Let's put it that way. Now what I just read was part shortage, painting, and I think it's Clinton Township is looking at putting sidewalks in there as well.
No, the sidewalk I was talking about was the Cass Avenue project that obviously we had a construction project for our bridge rehab, and in conjunction with that, we put a pathway attached to the bridge that was part of Clinton Township's work. So I was talking about that project as far as path and sidewalk.
Okay, so there's not going to be sidewalks.
No, Harper is a separate project just for bridge rehab.
And when something that small of a bridge, I guess you could use that term for that one, takes that long, how does that get communicated to the municipalities? I know you've got a website that says Macomb County Roads, but I had never read on there that that was going to be closed that long?
We send out, through our communications and public relations personnel, we send out weekly updates on all of our projects to the communities that they fall within, as far as timeframes and anticipated completion dates and activity that does go on within that week. So the communities are informed of that. As far as this project, they worked on it as needed, and it takes time. The only recourse we have as far as contracts going over the contracted allotment of time is if the contractor doesn't have enough extension of time requests that are granted and approved. So sometimes there's weather delays, sometimes there's material shortage delays, sometimes there's other delays that is not the fault of the contractor. So we grant them additional time beyond the contract completion date. But if they're extended over that, so if they get, say, 15 days of approved time extension and there's 30 days that they're late as far as completing, then there's 15 days that we can assess liquidated damages on a daily basis, and depends on the size of the program and project. There's a daily fee that we charge them. That is the only recourse we have to incentivize them to finish their projects on time. Some contractors choose to, if they have multiple projects, finish the ones that they're going to get damaged the most on, and then come back to the ones that they're going to be least damaged on. Sometimes they get too outstretched. Sometimes they have personnel and employee issues. I know a lot of contractors are also struggling with hiring employees to do the work also. So it's just the nature of the environment currently. We are struggling trying to find personnel also to fill all of our positions also. So.
Okay, next question on investment income. It shows a steady decline from 2019 to 2020 to 2021, and then 2022, it's 1/2 of 2021. So what kind of investment income are you guys talking about here? Since I know he sits on all 3 retirement boards.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. That is the money that we have either invested in CDs or in our Chase Bank account. And the interest rates have dropped dramatically, plus with the projection in decrease of fund balance to be used on the construction projects, it generates obviously less investment income.
So you guys are doing your own investing?
It goes through the Treasury.
He's doing the investing?
Correct. Yes, we tell them how much we need to come due on certain days to pay our bills or our payroll, and they invest our funds for us.
Well, from 2021 to 2022, it's 1/2 of the amount, which is almost $2 million less going back to 2019.
And we won't even hit that $1 million mark that we budgeted because the interest rates have dropped dramatically from when we submitted our budget over a year ago for 2021. So that's the budget amount, not the actual. It'll be less than that when our actual comes in.
Is there stipulations of what that can be invested in?
They, I believe, only invest in CDs.
Okay.
So those interest rates are really low. Plus, we're required to keep a very large chunk in our Chase Bank account per the Treasury's regulations, and that does not pay anything.
Maybe that's something we need to talk to him about. Okay, I want to go to your fund balance end of year 2021. You had a 111 million, and then it drops 40 million down to 2022.
Correct. The bulk of that is because of the Mound Road project.
So
that
you're
is a
spending
200 and...
It's north of $220 million as a total project, and that's split over 4 years. And the majority of the construction activities are going to take place in 22 and 23 as far as the bulk of the work, construction work, and that is the biggest price tag. So yes, our fund balance will be drawn down as significantly as a result of that project. We prepared our fund balance to be able to accommodate the cost of that mega project without having to bond or take out any loans for that. So you do see our fund balance decreasing as a result of that large project.
Last question. That's a very, very impressive prioritization list of where you guys plan on doing work. With the infrastructure package, they're talking of billions. Hopefully Michigan gets some. Does that change your prioritization list, or does it just add to it?
We do have certain projects and programs that we have cited for additional funding. If we do get, and it depends on, I mean, they talk about billions and millions, what it ultimately ends up being for us as a department in Macomb County is yet to be seen. The large number at the start does not mean the large number that we're going to get ultimately in the end as far as the road department, but we do have some projects indicated that we want to do. We just don't have the funding right now to be able to move those forward. The FAC, the Federal Aid Committee, is looking at projects for the years 2024, 25, and 26. So if we're looking at federal funding for some communities, which there's a need because some communities don't have the match money to do it 50-50 as a local project. So therefore we have to wait a few years in order to fund projects. So if we get infrastructure bill monies now, we can advance those further to compensate for waiting a few extra years to get that federal monies, usually at the 80-20% split, 80% federal, 20% local match. So between some projects that we have allocated or have our sights on and some of our annual programs, as I mentioned, our annual pavement preservation program, whether it's HMA or concrete, that's something we can bolster and improve on an annual basis and get direct results. We can do more roadways as far as asphalt overlays. We can get into more concrete patching, just as well as our sub-reconstruct program. We have $2 million allocated annually now. We can bump that up to double that. It depends on how much money we do get in. So there's things that we can do immediately to put that money to good use.
Thank you. You must have explained it correctly because your henchman behind you sat back down. So that was a good move.
Yeah.
That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Brown.
Thank you, Brian. It said something earlier, and I hope the commissioners appreciate this. No bonding. Road department's never bonded. They've always paid with cash the year they did projects. They always paid as they went. Conservative management. Going back as long as I've been on this board, 30 years, they've never bonded. They've always paid cash, which helps their balance sheet and keeps them stable. And that's a credit to the financial management, Michelle and her team, and the road commissioners that preceded the executive form of government before it came under our control. And that's a credit to, I mean, there's always more need for road money. That's a fact. But the fact that we're not paying interest and loans back with federal for money that we need to fix today's roads with today's dollars is really important. And that's sometimes overlooked, I think. And that's a credit to all of you over there at the Department of Roads, maintaining that philosophy under the new organization that we went to since the executive form of government, the year that we took over the Road Commission. The question is ARP funding. How much ARP funding were you scheduled to get, or do you know yet? Is there any preliminary numbers?
Here he comes.
Chairperson Brown, thank you for the question. On the ARP funding, there are provisions in the American Rescue Plan that prohibit the direct expenditure of federal dollars on road-specific projects. However, there are provisions in us to utilize those dollars for public works-related projects that are focused on underground. However, as Brian illustrated with the American Jobs and Infrastructure Plan, there is about $110 million over a 5-year time period that should be coming to the state of Michigan that will increase, whether there's dollars that are coming through MDOT State Transportation Fund programs and other direct transportation-related programs, as Brian said, whether it be asset management, preventative maintenance, things of that nature. We have not been given any prescriptive elements with regards to how those funds are going to be distributed from the feds down to the locals, but we'll actually be in Lansing tomorrow to get some intel on how that will increase the bottom line, specifically at
Only
Department of Roads.
$110 million for the whole state?
I believe it's 110 each year for 5 years. That potentially can be coming to the state of Michigan. Again, a lot of this is still being disseminated specifically with the federal government, and ultimately how those dollars will be programmed to state transportation agencies and then ultimately to our end. We've had a big philosophical discussion. $1 trillion sounds like a lot of money, but when you have 3,100 counties across the country, what does that mean for Macomb County and a lot of our transportation priorities? I think we've got a hell of a strategy in place, not only with the asset management program that we have, also with the Federal Aid Committee. We've got our projects ready to go. We have our priorities on the preventative maintenance side, and we are ready to advocate in whatever arena those dollars are positioned.
Well, the state of Michigan had a appropriate share that matches the county size as compared to the rest of the counties of the state. And So we should receive a disproportionate share of the money because this is where the cars and gas tax is generated.
Chair Brown, the
Personally.
other thing that we're very much tracking is depending on when you shop your groceries, whether it's $7 billion, $11 billion, or even today there were some overtures that could be up to $20 billion in supplementals that may be coming down the pipeline from the state in the next month, 3 to 6 months.
Christmas time in Michigan.
Those are dollars that will undoubtedly impact our transportation and infrastructure programs, and we'll be tracking those with Brian and also with Public Works Commissioner Miller.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
On infrastructure in the county, north end, a lot of ditching needs to be done, and there's always a long list of ditching that needs to be done, road ditches and so forth that affect the roads. Do you have enough equipment up there and manpower necessary to do that? Should we invest in some more ditching equipment and allocate more resources to that? Because the ditching for all of our dirt roads up there, a lot of rain we've had out here, it really makes it exposes every weakness. The road department of roads or the road public works, their manhole covers get covered with grass and leaves. Ours gets covered with mud and causes a lot of flooding and dangerous conditions. Can you speak to that a bit, Brian? What's the status of we got 2 service centers, New Haven and Washington Township Yard up there that service that north end. Do they have enough equipment up there?
Yes, I can say that they do. Obviously, as a director, I monitor the different department heads as far as necessity or needs, as far as personnel and equipment. As far as a maintenance department, we've made a conscious effort to, replace our tandem trucks, our dump trucks and salt trucks, so that we don't have any that are older than 10 years old, because sometimes finding parts and obviously they get older, they have more cost as far as repairs. And sometimes it's more challenging finding replacement parts to fix them. So we did establish that program. But as far as a need, as far as our budgeting is concerned, we look at a couple years out, and I haven't seen a request for additional equipment as far as ditching or grade-alls. So it's a matter of having adequate staff, which obviously we have some vacancies in our maintenance department primarily as a department total, and are looking at trying to fill those vacancies as everybody else is with staffing that we interview constantly.
The maintenance is great up there. I used to hear complaints. I don't hear complaints anymore about the maintenance of the roads, but I just know that ditching's a concern, and there's a long list. There always has been, and maybe there always will be a list. But I'm just wondering if we can't, help that out a little bit and move that up. But I'll leave it to your judgment. If you tell me it's sufficient, I'll take that.
Okay, thank you.
Your budget, there's utilities are down $64,000 for next year than as opposed to this year. What would make the utilities so expensive this year as opposed to last year? Did they bill us more DTE or overcharge us, or?
I'm sorry, what do you?
I'm looking at the utility line item in the budget is $524,000 2020, and it went up to $721 this year, and then drops down about $64,000 for next year. So I was just wondering, what's the fluctuation in the utilities?
When I budgeted for the utilities, our trending was way less than what we had budgeted in the past. We usually consistently budget around $720,000. And if you look in 19 and 20, we did not come anywhere near that amount. So I lowered the budget amount for the next 3 years, but didn't want to go all the way down because I budget very conservatively. Okay. So I brought it down, but not to what we've been running.
Okay. Also, the road construction maintenance, that's up $116 million. That's probably Mound Road.
Mound Road,
That's
correct.
Mound Road. Is it the same with contract services? That's 50% increase as
The
well.
contract services is Mound Road, our asset management program, and we have a lot of contract for design and CE services.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your team, Brian. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Commissioner Nard.
Actually, I withdrew, but since I do have you, I know that some people are going to ask me. So I see that you're going to be doing a repaving. You got that on there. Is South Macomb beyond 696 included in some of that? So I know you don't have many county roads down that way, but are those included in the resurfacing that's in there?
We look at needs and necessities in all communities, and that's based on our evaluations of the roadways, based on PACER ratings. It's a rating system done through SEMCOG ourselves and MDOT to evaluate road conditions and assess the It's a rating scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best roads, newest roads, and 1 being the poorest and deteriorated roads. So based on those PACER ratings in our evaluation and assessments through our maintenance department, areas that we have to go to and maintain on a regular basis that cost us money to do that, we look at establishing a project to eliminate our maintenance costs and do a repair or replacement project. So we look at an entirety. That's part of the asset management program that we are onboarding and looking at to make it more efficient and more of a objective determination of what projects we do in the upcoming years. So, and ensure that we hit our marks as far as timeframes and budgets that we have allocated on a year-to-year basis. So.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Commissioner Kraft is up next, so I think I'm supposed to take a long pause at this point. Commissioner Kraft.
I'll talk slow. Thanks, Madam Chair. Brian, couple questions for you real quick. In last year's budget book, there were 7 projects that were listed as carryover projects from obviously the previous year. You don't have any listed going forward, which is a good thing. So I'm assuming the projects of this year are going to be finished by the time the snow falls.
Yes, I mean, well.
Blink twice for no.
I don't think we had as many as the subsequent year. We do have some that, obviously, Harper being one of them. We do run into sometimes weather considerations. Sometimes the project gets delayed, not on our fault, but the contractor, chooses to work elsewhere. Sometimes not work as efficiently or as much on projects as they should. So some get carried over as far as that goes. Not that we don't have any, but we do have a reduced amount from last year. One of the things we're trying to do better is through asset management program that we are onboarding and instituting is being able to start our projects early enough, and it's not just design them the year before to build them in the following year. Sometimes it's a year and a half to 2 years that we have to start the process with all the environmental considerations, with all the SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, endangered species. There's a lot more hoops to jump through in order to get approval and obligation of monies before we can actually do the project. So we've had some challenges as far as getting projects to bid when they should be bid, and then the obligation authority monies run out because it's not a slotted, it's first come, first serve. So sometimes we missed out on that, and this process of asset management is going to get us on track to be more efficient as far as our timeliness of projects.
Gotcha. Okay, and then my next question, the list of projects is significantly longer for next year than it was in previous years, and it's about $100 million more worth of money being dumped in, and we were just talking about problems getting workers. Do you foresee that to be an issue with the increase in workload and potential for decrease in workers?
Once again, the majority of that increase is the Innovate Mound project, and that is the bulk of the increase. That is a substantial amount of the increase in our dollars that we spend. We do have a very robust program aside from Innovate Mound, and I think with our staffing as well as the continued increase in funding availability is going to bring contractors and bring workers back to Michigan to be able to facilitate the construction and completion of those projects that we have slated. So,
good. I mean, it's a significantly longer, just item by item, road by road list, which is great to see. And my last question real quick is, you mentioned the TAP grants earlier. So is that a state or is that a federal grant? Where does that initiate from? I know it goes from the locals and then it goes to you, but where do you send it to? The state? And then does it go to the feds, or how does that work?
There's one program that's through SEMCOG. SEMCOG has money for TAP grants. Does the state also? Correct. So there's two different, there's the state and then there's SEMCOG opportunities for TAP grants. And we submit applications for those communities as a fiduciary to access those TAP grant funds.
So do you roadblock any of those applications if a local municipality sends that to you guys? Do you just continue it on, or are there some that you will stop in that process?
We are working on a process of a non-motorized path program that vets and evaluates projects that are moved forward from the communities. They have to make sense on our roadway network and within our right-of-way. There have been some in the recent past that the communities independently have kind of approached SEMCOG or the state to get funding, kind of independent of us, and then come full circle when rubber hits the road and they need us as a fiduciary. Some of the projects haven't really made sense, so we're trying to be proactive and get there earlier in the ballgame and process to vet those projects that don't make sense in our road system.
Got it. Well, if there's any way us commissioners can help our local municipalities with letter of support or things like that, I know that's one avenue that we could go forward with. I know when I worked for Candace Miller when she was in Congress, we used to do letters of support for grant funding for roads all the time. So that may be something that we can do to be proactive to help our communities. Thank you, Brian. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Farrington?
Thank you, Chair. Brian, welcome again. Just one question. So you have the request for the 3 additional people, fully understandable, with your budget doubling. With that in mind, it slowly or fairly quickly starts going back down again after the mountain project and so forth. Is it reasonable to still need the 3 additional people, even though it's a 1-year peak?
Yes, I would say that's definitely the case. We have our Innovate Mountain project that we do have contracted services for that is alleviating the need of our own staff to oversee that project and that size of a project. But we still have our own programs and projects that we do have to move forward with. With the additional funding that is ramping up and ramped up, we do have that need with additional projects, both in our engineering and traffic department, that there are more coverage needs that we have. When I touch on the civil engineer as far as design, we previously did have a construction engineer that did the construction oversight for bridges, and then we had a full-time design bridge engineer that did the design for us. At some point, because of attrition, that person retired. We had hired somebody else to fill that position, and they left, and then the position just kind of fizzled out. So we contracted that service out. We have more of a need because of funding to get back into doing more bridge work because of the funding. So we'd prefer to do that design internally, so that's the need for that. As well as our traffic department is getting additional funds through grants to do signal improvements, traffic intersection improvements. So there's more of a need to cover those projects. We only have 2 technicians that do the inspection for the entire county. This would add a 3rd that's much needed. And then once again, with all the additional projects, finance is very stingy when it comes to money, and that's a good thing. They are great at what they do as far as accounting for our finances and making sure that we hit the marks and are very cognizant of being fiduciaries of our money. So there is definitely a need there because I wouldn't have had the request if there wasn't a dire need for additional staffing to support our projects.
Yeah, I guess I understand fully why the need is now. You still have it in there 2 years, 3 years from now. And that, I'm just putting it out there. The other part of that is you'd mentioned that you're currently using more contract services to make up for it, and yet the contract services don't go down in this budget or the next couple ones.
That is basically because of the Innovate Mountain project. That's contract services that we are hiring to oversee that mega project.
So once Mountain's done, the contract service line should sink down.
Yes, and once again, our asset management program is a big part of that also. Once our asset management program is in place and working, that dollar value will back off also as far as the need to have contracted services continue that support.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. When there's always, not always, there is often overruns with respect to construction. We've all experienced it in different projects, be it the county or another entity of government. When you have cost overruns that exceed the contingent, do you ever come back to us for approval on a cost overrun?
I could say that we, as a staff, and I guess I know because, prior to being director, I was a project manager for 20 plus years on road construction projects, usually the major reconstruct projects. With a concerted effort of our staff, not only engineering staff, but the inspection staff, we do a very good job and great job in monitoring and not having our projects go over. Our design of our projects that we do internally, that's why I stress the internal design that we want to have done. We get a better product of our design plans and project, which means less extras and less overruns when we actually do the project. Things aren't missed with plans. There's not extra items that the contractor's charging for. So we have a better handle on costs and overruns. If it does exceed a certain amount, I know as far as MDOT contracts, if we go over 10%, then that goes to an additional board at MDOT that vets and reviews those additional costs.
So with respect to us, if you were to go over on a project that isn't associated with that. I mean, I would think it happens, you run into something you weren't expecting under the road, you know, I would think it happens on occasion, and I just don't remember anything of that nature. Perhaps maybe what would be good would be to get a list of the yearly projects and the original contract amount, and then get a list of the final cost when it's done. Maybe get that on a yearly basis to give us an idea, because I'm sure you have a lot that come in under budget as well.
Correct. For sure.
So I think that would be valuable for us to see, because I know that's something that we haven't done a lot in the past, is coming back to the board when contingencies are exceeded. But after the downtown project, I thought we tried to establish that would happen. Not necessarily with you. I don't know that this has ever been, I don't know that I've ever said this to you before, but I just wanted to bring it up. I would like to see final costs, and I think you probably would have some that go over, and you would have some that don't. I don't see a problem.
I can tell you that just with my own personal experience as being a project engineer over 20 plus years on a project, I've had, I believe, 2 projects go over 10% of the amount that was originally allocated for. Like I said, I know specifically with MDOT contracts, you know, anything over 10%, then the approval process for contract modifications to adjust the dollar value of that contract needs to go to a separate ad board and needs additional approvals and vetting and additional explanation or reasoning. But I know 10%, whether you think it's a lot or not, 10% of a project is typically a lot when it comes to our projects as far as exceeding. And like I said, we can look at that in the future as far as anything local project.
You probably don't have as many problems. You knock down a wall in an old building and you find there's been bats in there for 30 years, you know, so it is a different.
Typically with our projects are large enough size where 10% is a very large dollar value. When you look at a $5 million, $8 million, $9 million project, that's a lot of money as far as 10% in excess.
All right, with respect to the PACER scale, originally, the Hayes project was online for $150,000, and we know that it wasn't $150,000. It was a lot more significant than that. I think it's like I'm not sure what the dollar amount was, like closer to $1 million or something. So,
correct.
How can you be that far off on a road? And if you're that far off on a road, obviously it's going to be a lot lower on the scale of as far as getting attention. But how can that happen when you're rating roads?
Well, with that particular project specifically, the initial evaluation was to just do a mill and fill, which is to leave the existing pavement in place, do some concrete patch repairs, do some curb and gutter repairs, mill it, and then resurface it. Upon further investigation, look, and evaluation, that wouldn't suffice for a fix.
No, and that's why I was asking, because when Commissioner Nard was asking about projects on the south end, and I once said, you guys aren't down there, you're up here, you're salting roads, you're plowing roads, you're on these roads on a regular basis. I think you only go down there mostly for the purpose of evaluating those roads. I could have told you 4 years ago, well, when I saw 150,000, I thought, oh my gosh, they think they're going to fix Hayes on 150,000. There's no way that's going to happen. So that's why I was asking that. And I don't know how much the asset management system improves that whole situation, because you're using the PACER scale now. But I don't know what your process is for evaluating roads in areas that aren't traveled a lot by the county.
Well, a lot of it deals with funding also. I mean, you know, some communities only have a certain amount of funding to match.
Yes.
And you can only do so much of a project. So obviously we try and make our dollars, as far as our monies are concerned, go as far as we can, as far as match monies from the communities, and if the communities can't match what's required, then sometimes we need to scale down what we do in that community. But I believe we got additional funding for that through state or federal opportunities. which obviously allowed us to move forward with a bigger scope project
So
for that.
I'm really more curious about the Pacer scale. Is it common to be significantly off like that? I'm not really worried about whether it's south end or north end. I'm more thinking about the Pacer scale and the reliability on it, and I'm just wondering if it's common to miss a road to that extent.
Well, like I said, once again, it depends on the amount of funding that you have available. Even though it would require something more, sometimes the funding isn't enough to account for what's actually needed.
But wouldn't the scale reflect what's needed, not what is going to actually take place?
Well, we tend to try and, if we don't have the funding, we can't do the appropriate fix. So we have to make it manageable for the communities also.
But you don't change the Pacer scale to accommodate that, do you?
We don't change the Pacer scale, but sometimes we have to look at what we are able to do as far as a fix and the dollar value of the
Okay.
fix. So the Pacer scale is a standard scale that is used across the country, and it rates pavements on a consistent basis as far as number of cracks, number of defects in the roadway, that is evaluated on a consistent basis, whether you're in Macomb or Oakland or wherever.
That's what I was thinking.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then you once gave a dollar amount. Commissioner Van Sickle had asked about using general fund money, and you once gave a dollar amount for the repairs in Macomb County alone to get our roads up to standard.
Correct.
Do you remember what that was?
I sure do. We did a evaluation with a couple of independent firms, doing some reporting and calculations, and we used Pacer rating based on 2019 because that's the latest Pacer rating data that we had. Obviously, last year with the pandemic, and this year there have been no Pacer ratings done in Macomb County or otherwise. We just got done performing those probably about a week or two ago, so we will get updated numbers. But as of 2019, we had approximately 50% of our local and primary roads that were in poor condition.
I'm just looking for a dollar amount.
2.3 billion.
What was that?
2.3 billion.
2.3. That's what I thought it was in the billions.
Yes.
Director Rhea, I just wanted to ask you, because I had a little bit of confusion about something. I thought that the transportation bill that just passed at the federal level, I thought the breakdown was $100 billion for roads and bridges. And so I look at that and I go, $100 billion, so that would be $2 billion for our state. And then you said $110 million every year for 5 years, which isn't even close to $2 billion.
So that was just for surface transportation. So there's different pools of money. That was one of the pools of money that is being reported right now. A lot of this is still preliminary, and we do not have detailed dollars or any of those funds.
Because I looked at, everybody's talking about this being transformative, and I think that the residents are going to think it's transformative, and I looked at the dollar amounts and knowing the condition of the roads, and I thought, that's the amount of money you need just for basic maintenance of the roads. The amount of money that they're talking about isn't going to transform our roads. He just said $2.3 billion for our county alone, and we're looking at 500 million, a little bit more than that, but we're certain that's for the whole state. So just wanted to kind of do a reality check on that. Our roads are not all going to be beautiful and wonderful after this package. I think that's basic maintenance. Chair Brown.
Unrelated, did we receive all the taxes that, several years ago, the state raised gas taxes and then only gave us a portion over a period of years? Are we finally caught up? Did we finally get all of our tax charges that we were taxed on 100% 5 years ago?
We did, yes.
Was this the final year that we got it? And how much was it, if you know?
Final year was in 2020.
Okay.
So we received, 2019 received an additional 7.6 million, 2019.
Okay, so they finally paid us what we'd given them
Correct.
5 years ago.
Yes.
Isn't that nice of them?
Yes,
I'm
very
so glad.
nice. And no interest.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, I see no other speakers. Please vote. Thank you. We had a lot of questions for you guys today. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you, Commissioners. Have a good night.
Motion passes 10-0.
Okay, correspondence, can I get a motion to receive and file?
So move, Song.
Support Farrington.
Any comments or questions on this receive and file? Okay, please vote.
Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you. I thought, oh, that's right. Public participation on anything anybody wants to speak about. Does anyone wish to be heard? Seeing none, we'll close public participation. Commissioners' comments? Commissioner Song.
Thank you, Chair. I just need some clarification why the commissioners' comments and the public participation are swapped sometimes.
We did it in the board rules, so I think it's supposed to be like this now. We
Okay.
switched them in the board rules.
As of today, moving forward.
I know that there've been a couple times they were the other way, but I think when we approved the new board rules in the line, we did put this underneath so that when there's a lot of people that speak at the hearing of the public and they ask questions, it gives us an opportunity in our comments to comment on some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I just have something very quickly. Army beat Air Force on Saturday. And Air Force had beat Navy, so that was, they were vying for the Commander-in-Chief trophy. They did not get it. So Army always plays Navy the very last game of the year. It's a big deal. These people live and breathe this stuff. And if Army beats Navy, then they win the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. If they do not, it's a three-way tie. It will stay with Army because they won it last year. My husband was not happy about Air Force losing. My father was very happy about Air Force losing. So, and then the last thing is just with respect to, bosses making more. It's interesting, we are all technically bosses, and thank God the employees don't have to be paid less than all of us, because we wouldn't have any employees. So with that, motion to adjourn?
So move. All.
Support? Please vote.
Motion passes 10-0.
Thank you, we're adjourned.